With over 120 million searches on Google, the interest in retinol and its vitamin A derivative cousins has never been higher. Now, I talk a lot about retinoids on this channel, but I do sometimes forget the perspective of somebody who may be starting out on their retinol journey for the first time. So in today's video, I want to go right back to basics and talk about the really essential things you need to know if you are starting out on your retinol journey. So firstly, let's address what retinol is. Now, retinol is true vitamin A. Now, it's not active in the skin in that form. What happens is it gets converted via two enzyme steps of oxidation into the active molecule, which is all-trans retinoic acid, or tretinoin, which is what we use on prescription and is considered the gold standard of acne treatment and also tackling the signs of premature aging. But when we think about what it's actually doing in the skin, it's fascinating. Retinol is actually a hormone. Now that might blow your mind slightly. It isn't something we think about, I think, when we think of skincare ingredients, but vitamin A is going inside skin cells, binding to receptors that switch on the transcription of genes at the very level of our DNA. And I think that's kind of amazing when you think about it. And you compare that to other much less sophisticated skincare ingredients, it's clear to see why retinoids lead the way when it comes to transforming our skin. So it's going inside cells, it's binding to receptors, it's switching on genes. What are the processes in the skin that retinoids can influence? Well, it turns out they influence pretty much every facet of how our skin functions. From cell differentiation and proliferation, so at the level of the epidermis, which is the top layer of our skin, it is speeding up cell turnover, it is improving the way they differentiate so that they reach their target structures more effectively. And in terms of what we see with the skin, that means a brighter, smoother, textured complexion. They switch on fibroblasts, the cells in our skin that pump out collagen, elastin, and glycosaminoglycans. So more collagen means thicker skin, it means fewer wrinkles, and it also helps us actually repair existing wrinkles. It's not just about prevention. We think about pigmentation. What do retinoids do for pigmentation? Well, it turns out they actually ensure the even distribution of melanin granules, the pigment part of our skin, more evenly, more effectively, meaning that we don't tend to get clumps and therefore areas of hyperpigmentation so much. What does it do in our pores? Well, it turns out it helps improve the way cell adhesion occurs. That means we are less prone to clogging up our pores with comedones. Keeping pores clear means fewer breakouts. So that's one of the really key ways that retinoids help reduce the risk of acne relapse. They're anti-inflammatory, so they influence cell cytokine production. And again, it's part of how they help so much in acne. And finally, they increase the development of blood vessels in our skin, what we call angiogenesis, which means plenty of nutritional value is reaching our skin, supporting health and function. So like I said, there isn't much that retinoids don't do. I hope you'll see that now that retinoids have the potential to benefit lots of individuals, whether it's in terms of putting together a great strategy for aging gracefully, or for dealing with pigmentation, or for managing acne. Really, with acne, they are absolutely fundamental to skin success. So for most of us, one of those, or maybe several of those buckets will be of interest. And when it comes to starting a retinoid, I really do think it's the time when you want to strip everything else out of your routine. So if retinoids are on the menu, you want to think about prioritizing those first. And the reason I say that is because the first 6 weeks can be a little bit up and down. Nothing to be scared of. I think to be forewarned is to be forearmed, but it really does mean you want to give them your undivided attention. So what does that look like? I think it means you've got your basics in place. So we've talked about your cleanser, your moisturizer, your SPF. SPF daily habit is fundamental when you're starting to use a retinoid. And if you're worried about the signs of aging, it should be in there as a thing that you don't even think about doing. It's just part of what you do. But those are the foundations that need to be in place before you start to use your retinoid. Now, in terms of which one you pick, if you go for retinol, that's fine. Start at the lower end of the strength spectrum. For most retinoids, there will be a range. Always go low. There really is no need to rush. This is a habit of potentially a lifetime, and we don't want to irritate or overly stress our skin at the beginning. We just want to build that kind of conditioning behavior. Think about getting ready to run a marathon. You don't go out and try to run 13 miles, a half marathon on day one. You do things incrementally. So too with retinoid. So you choose the right one, low strength, you have your tools. Start out with a less frequent application schedule and know what you're building up towards. Ideally, retinoid should be used daily if you can tolerate it. And I like to start them off at 3 times a week in the first instance. We always use retinoids at night. Many of the retinoid family are unstable when it comes to ultraviolet, so we don't want to use them during the day. So nighttime is the time for using your retinoid. We like to quantify how much you're using. These are potentially strong and significant ingredients that we're using. So we want to be measured, and we want to do the same thing with a degree of reliability. So we measure. Now, the fingertip unit is what I use. That means it's a line of cream from the crease at the end to the end of the fingertip. At the beginning, we use no more than a pea or half that line, half a fingertip unit. So it's important to visualize it and to be consistent with it each time you use your retinoid. Then we want to apply it correctly. Now, there are not many instances when I don't use the retinoid all over the face, if only for the fact that we want to get that brightening, smoothing, lit from within effect all over our skin, and not just on our problem zone. So even if your acne is just down on the lower part of the face, believe me, you're going to want to use it all over to get that brightness. So 13 dot technique comes in very handy here. Again, 3 dots on the forehead, 3 on each cheek, that's us up to 9, 2 on the nose, 2 on the chin. You're going to hear me saying this a lot, but I do believe it's key when it comes to getting an even application of product all over our face, which for certain types of products, we want that. We want to be systematic. We don't want to skip bits. We want the benefits all over because that's what's pleasing to the eye. Now, when you're starting out, you might want to be extra cautious and do your retinoid step over moisturizer. It's what we call buffering. I am a big fan of the buffer. And that's because it really does give you control, because even when you're an established retinoid user, there'll be days when your skin is a bit drier, it's more irritable, and you just know that if you use your retinoid full strength onto cleansed skin, it's going to be too much. So at the beginning, feel free to moisturize first, and then once your moisture has absorbed in, apply your retinoid on top. This does not negate its benefits. It does not stop it from working. Do not worry about it blocking the effects of your retinoid. I hear that from so many patients still. Those I've been looking after for a long period of time, they worry about this, but it's nothing to be concerned about. Your retinoid has the ability to penetrate into your skin very effectively, and moisturizer won't keep it out. So we've got an even layer, possibly over moisturizer if we're being careful, and we want to avoid the danger areas that if you're not used with a retinoid on your skin can cause problems. So I want to flag up the area around the eye, the creases of the nose and the lips and the neck. Those are 4 hot spots that if you put your retinoid on there accidentally, you may well wake up to redness and dryness and possibly even some irritation, swelling. Don't do that. So the way I like to approach that is to buffer off those areas first. I talk about my moisturizer goggles. Many of you will have heard this term before, but if you haven't, it literally means putting on a layer of moisturizer with a generous touch so that you've got physically present moisturizer on your skin. It just stops you from accidentally transferring active ingredients onto the eyelids without realizing. It's so easy to kind of just rub your eye across. And that can sometimes cause alarming problems. You know, you don't want to have that. So let's be careful. The lip balm on the lips, again, is a great way to buffer the lips and protect them as well. And just consciously wipe the area by the crease of the nose to avoid product building up there. With those little kind of thought out tips in advance, you'll find that you don't make mistakes. Similarly, moisturizer on the neck can help avoid product transferring onto the neck when you go to bed. Sometimes it just creeps down, whether it's smushed against the pillow or, something just transfers up accidentally. So again, moisturizer on the neck will help avoid that too. Now, a really common question is, what age is the right age to start using a vitamin A product? If you've got breakouts, that's a no-brainer. It's whatever age you start to get breakouts. And that could mean that you're on a retinoid from your teens through into your 20s, 30s, and beyond, because for many women, that tendency just doesn't tend to go away. If it's for aging prevention, I think your 20s is a good time to think about it. It does definitely depend on what your habits have been and how much sun exposure you've had over the course of your life. But I think if you're starting to see that early matteness, the skin's just not quite as juicy as it used to be, maybe you're a little bit less tolerant to a night of not perfect sleep, and maybe you're starting to see those first very early faint fine lines around the eyes, or maybe the skin is just not moving the same as it used to around the eyes. Those are signs that subtle changes are afoot. And at this point, when you start to use an active ingredient like a retinoid, you can make a big difference, provided you're using that all-important sunscreen, of course. So I think mid to late 20s is a good time to think about it if there's nothing else wrong with your skin. If there's something else wrong with your skin, then earlier is fine too. Situations where we shouldn't use a retinoid really are limited to pregnancy and those with skin conditions that retinoids don't suit. So we don't use in pregnancy because vitamin A is a signaling molecule in the developing fetus, so we don't want any confusion arising. It's very unlikely topical retinoids are absorbed systemically to the extent that they would interfere with this, but we just don't take any risks when it comes to babies. And conditions like eczema and rosacea, there may well be a point in time during your journey that your skin is able to tolerate a retinoid, but it's something that needs to be done with real care. And a final note on combining retinoids with other active ingredients. I think possibly the most common situation is people wanting to combine acids and retinoids. And if you're starting out, I would urge real caution when it comes to this. Firstly, retinoids in my book are so much more powerful than the typical acids. And by typical acid, I mean alpha hydroxy acid, so lactic acid or glycolic acid. In terms of benefits, retinoids are up here, acids are like way down there. So at the end of the day, complicating your life by adding in an acid which might make your retinoid penetrate more deeply, that might compound the potential for irritation without giving you much more yield, seems pointless to me. I would much rather you got used to using that strength of retinoid and then escalated up to a stronger one. I think you'll see far greater benefits and your life will be much simpler. So that would be my route if we're talking about combining retinoids with other active ingredients. If your skin is very tolerant, there is no problem with using an acid. I would tend to use that in the morning. But I think that if you watch the rest of this series, hopefully I'll persuade you that there are other active ingredients that will give you more benefits that are probably worth your consideration before adding in alpha hydroxy acids. Beyond that, there are lots of other ingredients you could consider. I mean, if you've got acne, you'll want to think about benzoyl peroxide or possibly azelaic acid and niacinamide. Either way, the space for those ingredients is in the morning. I tend to leave the retinoid to do its thing by itself at night and use the morning slot to incorporate any additional active ingredients. And do that cautiously. Get yourself used to using your retinoid, titrate it up, and then think about adding in any additional actives. Be careful. Retinoids do change your skin, but you will need to approach any other ingredients with that little bit of extra caution to ensure things go smoothly. So there's no doubt that retinoids have the power to transform skin and to do so in lots of different settings. I couldn't practice without them. They're fundamental to the way I treat my patients, they're fundamental to the way I treat my own skin, but they do require respect, especially when you're starting out. So take it slow, be respectful, and don't rush it. Above all else, be consistent. Use the same tools to support your skin on your retinoid journey. I know that the first 6 weeks might be a little bit up and down, but as you get used to what they do for your skin and how your skin behaves, you will learn to manage it, and undoubtedly will see the results if you stick with it. So I hope today's video has helped you if you're thinking about starting out. Please do think about taking the plunge. It'll be so worth it, and let me know how you get on. And if you've enjoyed this series of videos so far, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. I'll be back again soon with more Ingredients 101, but for now, bye for now.